In the heart of France, the new government takes center stage, tasked with addressing a nation's deepening challenges. From economic turbulence to evolving social tensions, these leaders must navigate a storm of expectations and realities. Today in Think Tank, we unravel the complexities of this administration's agenda, exploring both its promise and its pitfalls. Stay with us as we dissect France's future and its ripple effects across Europe.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Le Monde has reported that 2024 has been a disastrous year for French politics, with the country facing severe instability. For different prime ministers in 1 year, lack of budget and unfinished legislation have left France directionless and politically paralyzed. President Macron's promise for 2024 have been overshadowed by a string of ill-timed decisions that began in January, including the unnecessary removal of Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne. This set off a series of political crises, worsening his government effectiveness. Unions have voiced serious concerns, warning of an impending economic crisis with grave social impacts. They're urging the government to adopt a spirit of responsibility, dialogue and compromise to restore stability. On December the 23rd, President Macron appointed François Bayrou as the new Prime Minister after the collapse of the previous cabinet. Bayrou's government includes notable figures such as former Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne as Education Minister and Manuel Valls returning as the Minister of Overseas Territories. Despite aiming for a broad coalition, Bayrou's 35-member cabinet excludes the left-wing Nouveau Front Populaire, while prominent figures like Javier Betfriend declined positions. Bayrou's immediate challenge is securing a budget and serving a no-confidence vote. As political tensions increase, far-right and left-wing parties threaten instability. When Jean-Luc pledging a no-confidence vote motion in January. Bayrou is facing harsh scrutiny, and he sets about managing a government whose survival is uncertain. The Washington Post has reported that France's new government, formed just before the holidays, faces again immense challenges under President Macron's and Prime Minister Bayrou. The key struggle ahead is ensuring its survival amid a fractured political landscape and a struggling economy. With mounting national debt, pressure from the far right, and ongoing global conflicts, the government must navigate a volatile political and financial situation. Macron and Bayrou, both leadership will be tested by these pressing issues. The immediate priority will be stabilizing France's finances while addressing domestic and international crises, as failure could further destabilize the government. And to offer a deeper insight into the unfolding political landscape in France, we're joined by the economic expert Pierre Morin and Dr. Majid Boudin, a professor of international law. A very warm welcome to the program, to Think Tank, both our guests. And we start off with Dr. Boudin. Dr. Boudin, what are the immediate priorities of France's new government?
The major priority is to to establish a budget for the nation. Now we are late. We have made a special law to cover the needs of the state for its payments and recoverments. But now France must have a budget for 2025. And to deal with that, there is a huge debt. It's 6.2% of the rate of the
Of the
debt.
economy, sir, or of the
Yes, of the
finance?
economy, of the GDP,
GDP?
of the GDP. So it's for the growth of what the country is producing. We take out of it 6.2% to cover the service of the losses of the debts. So it's a huge amount. So it means that 6.2% of the production is going to pay the debts. And the EU regulations, this level should not exceed 3%. And so it's more than the double. And this is the worst in the EU area. So it's an emergency to do that, and it's urgent to do that. And to do that, we have two ways. Either the government should cut down a big share of its own expenses, or it must raise taxes. Raising the taxes is opposed by the central parties, which are the parties of the President Emmanuel Macron and of the Prime Minister François Bayrou. So, but the left is calling on the government to cut down, to raise the taxes. The other aspect is so what the government is going to do now, an agreement between the President of the Republic and the Prime Minister, is to cut down of the expenses, but not to cut down the social welfare system. So it means that they will have to preserve the lower classes and the poor people, so they will not be impacted by that. The second,
the second, sir, go ahead.
The second aspect is to raise taxes, but as far
Sir,
as
you have been reaffirming and very affirmative about the idea of the taxes. From your own perspective, sir, how do you think that it's possible to raise taxes at this point when there is all of these problems? On top of all is the government and the left wing and the right wing.
Yes, raising taxes, they have to preserve the middle class, but they cannot raise taxes on companies because they will push them down. So they will raise taxes only on the biggest companies, but even within this category, only on the super profits, not on the normal commercial profits, to let them be competitive in the world arena. So they will take a small share, and which is important, from their super profits coming out from the war, the Ukrainian war. Like for the oil companies, they have made super profits, which are not the normal profits. So from this part, they will impose taxes on only this part, and there will be some
compromise. Sir, I'll go to Mr. Marine. What fiscal policies might the new government implement to address the 2025 budget challenges, sir, at this point?
Yes, you're right. And the other guest also summarized very well the situation. So the problem now is to have a compromise. First of all, we need to reduce the social expenses, the public expenses. Probably we need to reduce them from, I think, 20 to 30 billion euro next year, and to raise tax, but only raising some tax like super profits or very rich people, but just a little bit, maybe 5 to 10 billion. to have this compromise. Then if we do this, probably the budget could be approved. But if we don't work on both aspects, the budget probably will be censored and one will be rejected another time. And if it's rejected another time, that means that the government will be overthrown, you know, that there will be a new government in some months. It's a very
Sir,
political
yes, we're discussing the third government in a year, or less than a year. Dr. Maureen, if we want to touch a point or nail it now, could you please, do you see or do you read, or your narrative is that the problem in France is taxes, or one of the main problems is the debt and taxes, like Dr. Boudin, and could you please comment?
I think the main problem above taxes, above expenses, the main problem is the political instability and the fact that President Macron and his government, they don't have a stable majority at the National Assembly. Then it's very difficult to have a budget approved. That's the main problem, political instability. The second problem is that it's an economic problem. The economic problem is that in the last years, you know, we don't have enough
for governments,
enough growth to pay all the expenses. If you have a good growth, 2-3%, most of the time you can pay and you can support all the expenses. You can reimburse the debt. And right now, we have a growth of around 0.51%. We don't have enough growth to pay the expenses. And then we have to cut. We have no choice. But at the same time, the left wing and the extreme right, they don't want they don't want too much pain, you know, for the poor people and for the low-income people. Then they ask to raise some tax, you know, and then we have to do this compromise. And the fact is that we are dependent on populist parties right now. That's the big problem, because the populist party, they have the majority at the National Assembly.
Dr. Boudin, could you comment please on Mr. Maureen, and are you okay with that what he's saying is exactly what you're saying, sir?
Yes, of course. I mean, this matter is a material matter. It's a factual matter.
Yes.
So,
what's the difference in structure, sir?
Well, first of all, the budget, for instance, for the last government, when the left right, the extreme right, and the extreme left has decided to overthrow the government, whatever would have been the budget, they have decided to put the government down, and they succeeded to do it. Why? Because if you take the far right and the far left, they don't have a majority, but the far left has within a kind of front, within an alliance, they have the Socialist Party, which is not an extreme left party. So now the Socialist Party has moved out materially from the Popular Front, which is led by the extreme left. And therefore, now they cannot overthrow the government, and they cannot censor the government. They cannot put the government down. So the government is in a certain way at ease to put up a budget, but the government should give some concessions to keep the Socialist Party.
But sir, changing 4 governments in a year does not mean that a government wants to make the left and the right want to make a concession at this point. And sir, who is we go to Mr. Maureen. Mr. Maureen, who is Macron the main reason behind this crisis that's taking place in France at this moment?
I think that President Macron, he has decided to make the dissolutions, and that was probably a big mistake. And indeed,
you said he made big mistakes, sir?
Yes, I think he made big mistakes when he
So you see,
he
he is the
decided.
reason behind this crisis is taking place now.
Is a little bit is responsible of this situation. Is not the only one responsible, but is one of the key
Who
people,
are
the
the other
key.
parties that are responsible, sir?
After that, the Populist Party are also responsible of these situations. But the Populist Party, they have a lot of approvals, you know, in France. And if we are in a democracy, we have to respect them, even if they are populist, even if they have some extreme right or extreme left, you know, even if they have ideas which are maybe are not acceptable for some of them, for some of us, but we have to respect them. But in fact, the problem in France is that there's a political, I would say, people are angry about the situation. People are angry about the fact that there are rising costs, there are inflation costs, energy cost is more important. European economy suffers a lot from what happens, you know, with the blocks, with the US, with the Chinese, with the automotive industry is in pain, you know, in Europe. Then you have some impact on the jobs, some impacts of jobs, of revenues, and then these people, they don't see a progression, they don't see improvement in their life, you know, in the last
Okay,
years.
sir, how could the political instability impact France's economic recovery efforts?
The political instability is the fact that if you don't have if you don't have a budget, for instance, you can support some farmers, some groups of people. If you don't have a budget, you know, people with their pensions, they don't have indexations of their pensions. You know, there are some you have some impact. You know, in the if you don't have any budget, you don't have any investment for the future, for the economy, for, you know, right now the France and European economy suffer. Then they need to do a lot of investment in research and development to fight to fight or to compete, you know, against USA, against China, you know. And then if you don't have this investment, we're going to suffer more and more, you know, and to
Okay.
have less competitiveness. You have a report from Mr. Draghi, the former European Central Bank president, who has talked about the agony, you know, slow agony in the Europe
Sir, I'll leave
economy.
it there. I'll go to Dr. Boudin. Dr. Boudin, what are the implications of forming France's fourth government within 1 year? And why do you think at the beginning of the year in Jan, when President Emmanuel Macron just decided to make a new government and called for new early parliamentary elections, what was he thinking at this point, and why did he do this?
Well, he did that because in the European elections, he has seen the far right movement or far right party climbing to a third of the voting electorate. So then he decided to clarify the situation to see whether the France wants a far right government or not. And why he
Do
did
you think
that
his
at that moment?
decision was wise, sir?
I'll tell you another point, and then we see whether it's wise or not. The point is for him is to say either he as far as he's the president and under the fifth constitution, the president have a lot of powers. He was thinking that if the far right will come to the power with a majority or a relative majority, as president, he can face them. And he could block them from doing whatever they wish. And because under Article 8 of the Constitution, he could refuse to sign the decisions of the Council of Ministers for certain ordinances. He has his specific powers as president. He has his legitimacy. But if he leaves that until 2027, he was sure, he was thinking that that the extreme right will come to power, but then not as to form a government, but to be the president of the republic. And then nobody can face this strong power because they have a huge, the president has a huge power. So he made this choice, whether it was wise or not, whether it is now it's a fact. And this fact he is now trying to control. When he made this, when then we saw the results of the legislative elections, the parliamentary elections, we have seen that the right, the extreme right, has not that big power because the other parties has made an alliance to block them. So when they did block them, it was a very good result. The problem came after that the people in the extreme left, they did not understand that they obtained a mandate to have the first place as party in the parliament.
So it's the problem between the left and the right, sir.
Yes. So the problem here is that they did not understand that they have a mandate not from their own electorate, but they have it also from the right and from the center. And they were trying to make the propaganda that they came to power as the first force, while they came with the votes of the right and the center, and they should have try to find a compromise with these other forces. And as like the right, they did not understand that some of their members of the parliament came with the votes of the left, and they should have made a compromise to govern the country. And
all
this
respect,
is why,
sir, Mr. Mouin, commenting on Dr. Boudin and what he just said. Of course, I asked him a very clear question about who was behind the reason and the crisis that took place in France. Is it President Emmanuel Macron? And why are we now discussing a fourth government in France at the end of the year 2024? What is your narrative, sir? Is it the same as Mr. Boudin, and the problem is the left and right, and what he said, please? And did you listen to him?
Yes, I think that there was the elections, the parliamentary elections. And after these elections, we had a first force, political force, Nouveau Front Populaire, Popular Front, you know. They were first. I think what could have done...
Sir, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm very sorry, but why again? I asked Mr. Boudin this question, and I'm asking you again. Why did Emmanuel Macron call for early snap elections at that point?
I think he called for these elections because he was annoyed to see the extreme right first at the European elections. But he had no problem with the National Assembly. He had a small majority, but he had this majority. I think he made a mistake doing this. I think he was annoyed about these situations, and I think that these situations didn't solve any problems. Is that with these situations, we have more and more problems. We have less and less political instability. We have more political instability. We have less political stability. He shouldn't have done this. Even if
budget and tax and...
For the budget and the tax, the problem is that with the growth in France slowing down, the problem is that we don't have enough taxes, resources, taxes to pay, to pay the social expenses and the public expenses. And don't forget that France has the highest public expenses probably in the world, in the G7, in the OECD countries. It's 56% of the GDP. It's not a good situation.
Unfortunately, that was Pierre Maureen and economics and Dr. Majid Boudin, international law professor. Of course, we thank you so much for your insights and informative knowledge, and thank you very much for your time. As France's new government charts its course, the coming months will reveal whether ambition aligns with actions or if all challenges resurface in new ways. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.